Well, looking at our screen now, we can see that the former president of Nigeria, that the new president prays history will be kind to, has arrived in Katsina. I guess he'll be moving to his home state, Daura. He's made it very clear, that he's looking forward to it, and I guess the moment is now. He's on his way home.
All right, and there's a whole lot to get into with respect to what we just heard from the President Tinubu about fuel subsidies. You're seeing the breaking news right there. It says fuel subsidies are gone. He also says monetary policy needs thorough cleaning and that the Central Bank of Nigeria should work towards a single exchange rate. He's also targeting a minimum of 6% GDP growth. We might leave the studio at 7 p.m. tonight because we've got Miss Professor Bongo Adi of the Lagos Business School, Professor of Economics at the Lagos Business School, to speak with us. Professor, you are very, very welcome. Good afternoon to you. First of all, before we jump into the economics, what do you make of what we've seen so far today? What's your take on, I guess, the historic moments of today?
Thank you very much for having me this afternoon. I think it's truly a historic moment. President Tinubu, and I'm happy to use that. I think he struck the right notes. I wasn't expecting it to be as good as it has turned out to be. But again, this is not the first time we're hearing very lofty and sweet talks. I guess if I remember vividly, President Buhari, former president, when he was inaugurated in 2015, remember his famous saying that he will be for, I forgot how he put it, that I belong to no one, I belong to everyone. Yeah. So that's sort of, or at least on that day, endeared him to many Nigerians. But then after that, I think that was just the only good thing I will, link to his administration. So I just pray that today's speech will not turn out, like that. But, I think President Tinubu has done very well. And also as a liberal person, as a market-driven, administrator, he has also shown his mettle right away. So he has removed the fuel subsidy. He also spoke about unifying the exchange rate, which everybody, he hit all the right notes everybody wanted to hear. This morning, coming to your studio, I could see the lines coming back to the filling stations because I think they were expecting that this will happen. And now that it's has happened, I don't know what's going to be the price, the pump price, starting from this moment. So, but this is the right way to go. 2 days ago, I was on your channels. I was with Dr. Abati and Rufai, and then they also asked me about this fuel subsidy, and I made it clear that the fuel subsidy has to go, because it seems to really favor the rich and the elites mostly, even though some people argue that the poor people also benefit from it. So I think President Tinubu is speaking the minds of many Nigerians. He has hit the right notes. And in fact, I salute his courage, in the key steps he has already taken. So I think, they say well begun is half the battle.
Yes, indeed. And, he talked about so many other things beyond the fuel subsidy, although many of us were anticipating some message. One of the very first things he said is GDP growth of not less than 6%. And then he went on to mention budgetary reform. What do you think some of the things he needs to do to achieve and sustain that level of growth are?
That's, the devil is in the details, right? So it's very easy to say that you want to drive a 6% growth, or not less than 6% growth of the GDP, the gross domestic product. But given the country that we have and the system that the former president is leaving behind, I think we will not expect that to happen immediately, because a lot of reforms need to happen. A lot of house cleaning, and I'm happy that he even used that phrase. So he has to do some house cleaning, sanitization even at the central bank, because that's where the growth will start to emerge, because a whole lot of things have happened in the central bank. And I also, listening to him, he spoke about refocusing the central bank so that it will remain committed to its core mandate, which is that of monetary policy. leaving aside all the other encumbrances that's taken upon itself in the past few years. So I'm happy to hear that. Now, going into the details of what needs to happen for us to have 6% growth. There is something that we haven't quite, done in Nigeria, and unfortunately, the president didn't also mention that, which has to do with evidence, data. Yeah. I keep talking about data. We don't have data. Now, to drive growth is a simple thing, okay? But what do we need to do? Growing our gross domestic product is one thing. But then, generating sufficient revenue, because that's what everybody is actually listening to here, not just, growing the product, the output in the nation, but how do we grow our revenue? Now, talking about data that hasn't happened, that we haven't quite curated, which has to do with export potentials. Now, if we look at our export profile, we need to identify those ones that have enormous export potential, because that is the key to unlocking this economy. The key to unlocking the economy is export. Are we able to build an export-driven economy? Yes, he has, shown his commitment to market-driven reforms, to a liberalized economy, giving assurances to both local and international investors, talking about the taxation, addressing all those the concerns of our investors. But the most important thing towards growing the GDP is for us to identify those products, those outputs or production bases that have huge export potentials. And then government will now need to support those who are involved in those industries, in those sectors that have huge export potential, because that is the lowest hanging fruit, and that is the way to proceed. So if we can do that, but we do not even have the data on the sectors that have huge export potential. So it's not just about driving a 6% GDP growth. That can only happen if we are able to achieve the revenue that will help you to really unlock the potentials in the economy. Because the economic policies, the economic ideology of today is an export-oriented one.
Now, Professor, the president saying that fuel subsidies are gone, without actually talking about palliative measures that will be put in place to cushion the impact on the masses, isn't that calling for a showdown, with civil society organizations? Is that the best way for his administration to hit the ground running?
Yes. I don't think that he needed to start to window dress all these things or to pay just lip service. This is don't forget that as he also rightly pointed out, that this is the most keenly contested election in the history of Nigeria. So Nigerians were actually looking forward, even his detractors, his critics were, waiting for him, to make the wrong move. But I think he's actually somehow, he has made everybody uncomfortable, because he actually hit the right notes. Okay, so he clearly made it. He made it clear that he remains committed to free market economy, and the best way to start. Fuel subsidy is not our only subsidy. But then again, I think I can also criticize him, because he says that he's going to restore agriculture, subsidies, minimum prices. We already have heavy subsidy in agriculture, which I think we need to go as well, because if you want to open it to the market, you have to remove this whole regime unscramble the regime of subsidy completely. But he maintains that. Now, coming back to the first subsidy, is it the right way to go? I would tell you that yes, it has to. And then do we have to, keep postponing the doomsday? I would say no. Let it come now. The riots, the demonstrations, labor, let them bring all everything they have right now so that it can be handled. Yes, he didn't also unroll the palliative, measures that we'll use to complement this. But I believe that they should be working out all of that. But I would have expected him to really assuage the hopes of Nigerians, some people who think that fuel subsidy is everything. Some people claim that that is the only thing the poor people benefit, in a government that is so much aloof from the people. But I don't think that is the right way to put, to cease subsidy. Subsidy doesn't benefit the economy, and that the way we are right now, there is no way we can accommodate subsidy within our fiscal system.
Yeah, but Professor, see, and this is what some have said, that President Buhari, former President Buhari, has put President Tinubu in a tight situation, because now he's forced to remove subsidies at a time where the naira is where it's at as far as the weak purchasing power. You've got high inflation. You've got Rolake was pointing to poverty statistics earlier on, and the pass-through effect, Professor, of raising fuel prices. 96-97% of goods move by road. So you're going to see that pass-through effect on transportation. It might also feed into food prices as well. What about the average Nigerian? The short-term shock, how painful is it going to be, Professor, once these fuel subsidies are removed?
Okay, so let's look at the things that drive inflation. Much of what we know about inflation in Nigeria today is the cost push inflation, which also seems to be imported. Not seems to be imported, it's actually imported inflation coming from the exchange rate pass-through, and as well as the COVID-19, Russia-Ukrainian conflicts, the wheat, commodity issues. So we understand where inflation is coming from. So for us to understand inflation, so let us disaggregate, unpack all the contributing factors to inflation. So if we take out the exchange rate, which will be more than 50%, then you need to remove the cost push coming from the commodity, the commodity price shock that we witnessed in recent times. And of course, energy costs, fuel costs itself internationally, it contributes to that. That's the problem we have, the irony. We produce fuel, except that Dangote refinery, we expect that it begins to produce. But unfortunately, I don't think that Dangote is going to subsidize anything for us. So it will also be buying at the market rate. So let's keep that there. So we have fuel, the fuel cost that has gone up in every country in the world. We have the exchange rate. There is no currency that has maintained its rate against the greenback in the past, going to 18 months now since the start of the Russia-Ukrainian conflict. So when we put this together, then the contribution of domestic fuel consumption to inflation will just be a minimum, let's say 20%. So if we put that, then we'll expect an increment or an increase of just 20%, not 100% as you might think. So if you remove all this. Now, let me tell you how the removal of subsidy could actually help in cushioning, that effect, because the exchange rate effect. Because much of the pressure on our exchange rate, exchange rates comes from the government looking for funds, to buy, to give to marketers, right? So that is where we have the run on the exchange rate, because you have now many competing needs for exchange rate. So you have from industries, from the sectors that have to import their raw materials from all over the world. And then we now have to import fuel massively at a subsidized rate. So government has to find the foreign exchange to give to marketers. So now that that is gone, so government doesn't need to worry too much about that. So the pressure on the naira is going to lessen. Okay, the pressure on the dollar is going to, because the demand for that will kind of go down. So with that decreased demand for the dollar, the CBN doesn't have to intervene any longer. The CBN doesn't need to find the exchange rate to give to the foreigners to give to marketers, right? So that will reduce the pressure on the foreign exchange rate. So aiming towards the unification harmonization of the exchange rate that the president talked about. So we may see the exchange rate dropping from where it is now and go with the black market rate, not the official rate.
We'll have to follow up on that, Professor. 1 second. Let's go to Adesoa Mora, State House correspondent, who is at Eagle Square live. Adesoa, good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for being there on the ground. How would you describe the mood of the Eagle Square? We saw the vibrant colors and everything. Temi Tokman Rolaka with me here as we're looking on. Give us a synopsis, Adesoa.
Thank you very much, Rochus. Indeed, you're very correct. It's been a very colorful event here at the Eagle Square, the inauguration of Nigeria's president. At exactly 10:38 a.m., Rochus, Rolake and Temitope, Nigeria got a brand new president in Bola Tinubu, who took his oath of office at that time. He also, while taking that oath, vowed to preserve, protect the Constitution. However, moments ago, he gave his inaugural speech, which was about almost 30 minutes long, and he covered quite the ground. For a lot of people, he would be saying the right things about the economy, about the mood in the country. He referred to those who have taken the outcome of the election to court, talking about the opposition, the People's Democratic Party and Labour Party, even though he did not mention them, who I can tell you are not a part of today's event here at the Eagle Square. It's a very festive mood here, and like I said earlier, the weather as well, Mother Nature played a significant role in setting the tone of today's event. It started with showers in the early hours of the day, setting that very calm, sober moment. However, as the sun began to shine after the rain stopped, it became very, boisterous. It became very lively atmosphere with party supporters, party leaders, praising and cheering the president when he was, for instance, inspecting the parade, the brigade here at the Eagle Square. And when he was even giving his speech, was amidst resounding cheers reverberating across the Eagle Square this afternoon, Rochus.
Well, Adesoa, I'm wondering, if you can just give us a roll call of what the turnout of dignitaries was like at the inauguration, talking about, African leaders, international leaders, that graced the occasion today.
Temitope, thank you. I think the question would be who was not here on that roll call. Practically everybody was here. We had world leaders from over 40 countries, presidents from West African countries and beyond. Those who could not make it sent their representatives. We had diplomats, heads of state, heads of government, even from China, where we had a representative from the ruling party in China here today. Everybody has been here, not just diplomats, but the APC party members, the supporters, the ordinary Nigerians who eventually were led through the barricade onto the ground of the Eagle Square to come and witness this historic event. But you talk about dignitaries. We have some of them here. The crew has been able to, amidst this, exciting atmosphere, grab some of them. And we have a member of the just dissolved cabinet of former President Muhammadu Buhari, former Minister of Sport, former Minister of Youth and Sport Development, Sunday Dare. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
How does it feel, really?
There's a feeling that an athlete feels when you run that race and you breast the tape in victory. I think that's the feeling that fills the air. But also when you know the antecedents of the man that became president today. He has really worked really hard, dedicated, a nationalist, and you see a man ready to lead. That's the new president that we have, a man who is ready to lead. He was formed in the crucible of democratic struggle, a man who stood with the progressives, his feet set in wet cement without changing his principles or ideals of governance. And you have seen how far it has led him. A man that chose the road less traveled. He stayed consistent with his beliefs and principles of a democratic society. And we thank God Almighty he's been rewarded with the leadership of this country at the time that it matters most.
Well, during his speech, he took out time to speak about former President Buhari. He described him as a patriotic leader who has served the nation to the best of his capacity. You were a member of the Buhari cabinet. How would you appraise yourself? I know it's interesting to give yourself a pat on the back, but for many Nigerians, it's a mixed feeling with the administration you were part of.
You know, there's nothing that's 100%. No government comes in and is able to solve all the problems. We have seen under Buhari administration an attempt to confront our challenges, to provide solutions to our problems. And I think that's what we should focus on. He has passed on the baton to another leader who has the capacity to continue to build and consolidate what has been done, but also to take on those challenges. His speech, it was very clear. They were segmented. The position of youth and women, that of agriculture, that of 1 million jobs to be created in the digital economy. You see a man that is ready for the 21st century challenge. So governments come in. You attempt to do what you can do. You move on. No government can solve all the problems, and no government is 100%.
And at one time, you were chief of staff to President Bola Tinubu. You know the man very well, and given that antecedent, is history about to repeat itself? Are you going to be chief of staff? Do you know? Would you like to tell us what you know about the incoming cabinet?
My response is that I'm willing to serve in whatever capacity that will bring value to his leadership and his presidency, but ultimately that will help him realize the dreams he has outlined very clearly in his manifesto and action plan, and also in his speech today. Whatever it's going to take to make sure that we realize that, I'm willing and ready to serve in any capacity.
But how would you describe the man in a sentence? I mean, he said a lot during the campaign. We have the Renewed Hope document, the manifesto, and he's spoken again to Nigerians for the first time as their president. Is it just all, sweet talk?
No, this is a man with a track record. You can check him out. 3 decades of commitment to democracy. What he did in Lagos still remains very, very, very relevant. 20 years development plan. So this is a man who knows what he's talking about. He has a track record. He has the experience. He's a leader of men, a builder of men, a talent hunter, a democrat, and a nation builder. You can't take that away from him. The facts, as they are incontestable when it comes to Ashwaju. No leader in our history has ever been prepared for leadership and to be president like Bola Ahmed Tinubu.
Thank you very much, Sunday Darius, former Minister of Youth and Sports in the last administration. So there you have it, Rotus, Temitope, and Rolake.
Great stuff. Adeso Mora on the ground there at Eagle Square. Thank you so much for getting us that interview with a member. Okay, actually, yeah, one more question. Professor, what do you make of what we've just seen? I guess we want to actually, you were touching on exchange rates just a moment ago, right? And just the actually, Rolake, maybe I should let you throw your final question.
Yes, I was actually going to ask the professor that one of the things that wasn't actually really alluded to in that speech was Nigeria's debt sustainability and how it's going to be managed. For me, it was like a big elephant in the room. I mean, all of these things that he needs to do will need to be funded somehow. And there's a question of debt sustainability. What do you make of what the new administration's plan with regards to that might be?
Well, he didn't touch on that directly. And that's why when you asked me the question about how to achieve the 6% GDP growth, I said that there is no way you can focus on growth without thinking about the revenue that will drive that growth. So, and then I spoke about the export potential, the sectors that have the biggest export potential, because that's where we expect to see the growth. Now, talking about debt, and it's a good thing he didn't quite focus on debt, because the debt situation is quite intractable. So it's not something anybody will just jump into without really thinking through it. It's a huge one. Especially where you have, huge debt service to revenue, So it's not a simple matter, and I am sure that he understands that. He wouldn't want to, fray any nerves, because if he begins to talk about that, perhaps he may be tempted to say that we will default. Investors will never want to hear that, right? So you're trying to rebuild your economy. You don't want to talk about debts at all. So it's a good move. He didn't dwell on debts. And, some people are of the opinion that perhaps we need to borrow even more, to get ourselves, because we have to fund the investment options that he has outlined. They need funding. So we need to raise more money, whether domestically or internationally. But even the international option is no longer there.
Professor, we have to run to Delta say thank you. So I wanted to badly ask you about ways and means, because they increased that cap to 15%, but we'll have you back again. Lots to discuss. Let's get to, thank you so much, Professor Bongo, economics professor at the Lagos Business School. Let's get